Have you ever dreamed about becoming an IFBB pro? With our new ultra-modern science-based hypoxia-regulated lengthened extension mechanostressed squats, you can easily achieve your goals.
With our exercise, leg extensions are obsolete. They should be relegated to edge cases only. Let's see this.
Lengthened partials have been recently shoved under the microscope in the fitness world. So-called science-based lifters have become obsessed with the possibility of squeezing out more gains from their workouts based on the findings from scientific literature. But does this mean that traditional exercises like knee extensions are obsolete and, quote, should be relegated to edge cases only? Let's dive deeper.
Milo claims that knee extensions are a shortened partial, but I'm not so sure. It varies between machines, but generally speaking, you're not only going to be working in the top half of knee extension range of motion, as Milo would insinuate. That's still fine, though. Milo published a meta-analysis comparing full range of motion to lengthened partial range of motion and found lengthened was superior. But let's dive deeper into the actual RCTs on lengthened training. In triceps brachii, Goto et al. Found a 20% muscle thickness difference in the lengthened partial range of motion group compared to full range of motion as measured by ultrasound. Furthermore, Mayo et al. Found a 7% anatomical cross-sectional area difference when triceps extensions were performed overhead on one head versus in front of the body on the other. The long head is biarticular, so it's lengthened when overhead. Another study conducted by the same group found a similar response in the knee flexors, with a 5% hypertrophy difference when leg curls were performed seated versus prone. Same deal there with biarticular muscles. And yet another by Cassino et al. Saw approximately 8% greater medial and lateral gastrocnemius muscle thickness in the initial range of motion training group compared to a full range of motion. But how about what Milo said about knee extensions? Well, it turns out even here he might have a point. Pedrosa et al. Found partial reps in the initial range of motion led to greater hypertrophy in the rectus femoris and vasti muscles compared to full range of motion. And perhaps most related to the suggestions made by Milo in the real, Larson et al. Concluded that knee extension exercise with 40 degrees of hip flexion led to greater rectus femoris hypertrophy than with 90 degrees of hip flexion. So then it's conclusive, right? Ditch the knee extensions and do 52 sets of sissy squats instead? Maybe not. Firstly, the number of studies investigating muscle length or range of motion as a hypertrophy training variable are limited, and many of them have deep methodological flaws. Many don't report volume load of each group, which has been shown by Carvalho et al. To be a critical factor for hypertrophy. This leaves the possibility that one group just did more work causing the observed differences in gains, such as in Goto et al. And Mayo et al. Another issue is that these papers often have participants performing a fixed number of repetitions. Robinson et al. Demonstrated in a series of meta-regressions that training in closer proximity to failure yields greater hypertrophy. This means that in a study like Mayo et al., differential hypertrophy between conditions may be caused by differences in proximity to failure. And unfortunately for Milo's thesis, the Pedrosa et al. Knee extension paper fell into both of these pitfalls. To speedrun a few other problems with the literature at large, we have no blinding of the person analyzing the MRI and ultrasound images, differences in what actually defines the long muscle length condition, small sample sizes leading to underpowered studies with non-significant results, weak effect sizes of the lengthened condition, and perhaps most egregiously of all, the use of standardized mean differences to dodge the aforementioned underpoweredness and tiny effect sizes while attempting to draw broader conclusions than are able to be made. Which brings us to the Larson et al. 2024 study, which Milo himself actually co-authored. They found no significant differences in hypertrophy between the two conditions. The graph of differences looked like this. But they didn't like this result, so they decided to then improperly employ a standardized mean difference score to produce a graph that looked like this. And oh wow, now lengthened training is actually superior to conventional training.
So why do these researchers think lengthened training is superior? Goto et al. Proposed the metabolic stress hypothesis. This theory suggests that metabolic byproducts such as lactate, hydrogen ions, phosphates, and in the case of lengthened training hypoxia, leads to cell swelling and anabolic signaling. Perhaps more present among science-based lifters and Milo himself in his meta-analysis in the theory of mechanical tension, which proposes that the muscle will grow more under high mechanical tension once stretched. This effect is brought forth mainly by mechanotransduction, wherein the stretch-mediated force activation of mTOR stimulates protein synthesis and structural cell adaptations. Having a theoretical framework is great, and all but relying on theory without consideration of practical training factors would be misguided. For a good example of this, we need to look no further than comparing squats and knee extensions. The squat is used as the king of lower body strength and hypertrophy through high levels of mechanical tension with greater external loads, especially at the bottom of the movement where the quadriceps are in lengthened position. In addition, squats are multi-joint exercises that contribute to systemic adaptation due to the engagement of several large muscle and joints for overall strength. By contrast, leg extensions may be considered less effective in both the mechanical tension and metabolic stress hypothesis, less load being lifted, less work being done, less intramuscular hypoxia, and yet, when directly compared, Erb et al. Showed no difference in growth between the two training modes.
Okay, so maybe the literature isn't that clear, but what if you're a bodybuilder trying every possibility to squeeze out a bit more gains? Isn't it worth a shot, even if the effect isn't real? Well, this gym bro should know the incredible ubiquity and importance of progressive overload. We know progressive overload, whether through increased reps, sets, or load, is a critical factor for hypertrophy. Simply put, sissy squats cannot match the overload ability of a knee extension. They're inherently more unstable and require technical proficiency. And I think it's also important to talk about accessibility. Fitness influencers love overcomplicating training. The issue is that studies showed complexity deters beginners. When asked about barriers to beginning resistance training, Vasudevan and Ford cite reports of new trainees not knowing how to lift weights, what exercises to do, remembering how to do the exercises, or how to use the equipment. Milo is directly putting up barriers by casting doubt on the effectiveness of a simple, scalable, and proven exercise ideal for everyone from a day one gym goer to a Tom Platz.
Lengthened training is not bad by any means, and it seems likely that it's at least equivalent to the conventional resistance exercise, but this doesn't mean knee extensions are an edge case exercise by any stretch of the imaginations. Maybe throw in some lengthened partials at the end of the set if you want, and ignore the noise. Science-based lifting is certainly better than trust me bro lifting, but unfortunately hype and low quality studies seem to have infected the field. Fitness isn't about edge cases, it's about sustainable gains, so keep doing your leg extensions and rest easy knowing your shitty genetics is probably the actual reason why you aren't an IFBB pro yet.